So on our last Blu-ray review, I reviewed an IMAX documentary called Super Speedway. Well, here's another review of a slightly more recent IMAX documentary Blu-ray. It's called Deep Sea from 2006. The most notable difference between this film and Super Speedway is that this one is more geared towards younger audiences. Whereas Super Speedway may be too intense for kids because of the loud and powerful race car sound effects, Deep Sea is much more gentle and graceful, and it showcases the various beautiful creatures of the Big Blue. It really is just a 40-minute ocean life documentary for kids to see on a giant screen and get immersed in it, you know. It showcases the various undersea creatures like coral, jellyfish and barracudas, and how they rely on one another for survival. But of course it's also about how these creatures eat one another. All this magnificent undersea footage is narrated by Johnny Depp and Kate Winslet, and features some very nice classical music composed by Danny Elfman. Johnny Depp and Kate Winslet don't really sound exceptionally amusing here, but they get the job done.
In fact, those claws are as fast as a .22 caliber bullet.
While Johnny Depp's voice is slightly more recognizable here, you probably wouldn't know that the female voice was Kate Winslet if I didn't tell you it was Kate Winslet. And about the only bad thing about the narration is that it is a little too cheesy at times.
What's that?
It's called a proboscis.
Ugh. Overall though, I'd say this film is more accessible than Super Speedway because unlike that previous film, you don't necessarily need to be a hardcore marine life enthusiast to enjoy this documentary. If you have kids and are looking for a kids-friendly documentary about ocean life to watch with your family, this film isn't a bad choice. But if you're not in that kids demographic, you may not enjoy it as much when you're watching it on your own. Before I get started on the video quality, I should let you know that this is the 3D Blu-ray version here that I'm reviewing, but since I don't have a 3D TV, I can only access the 2D presentation on this disc that I saw. And for the record, it's okay, but it's a little less impressive than I expected. While it's far from terrible, the overall image looks a little softer than I would like. I'm not sure if it's because of the lack of contrast in the lighting, or is it because it was shot underwater, or it's because of the original film stock, but having seen Super Speedway, I expected a little better than what I saw. On top of that, the transfer occasionally has some inconsistent black levels and some mild color banding in the background. But all that said, you can also subjectively say that this softness makes the underwater look more convincing. The shots themselves still look fairly detailed, and I can imagine they'll look magnificent on a large IMAX screen, maybe even better in 3D. But as I previously said about Super Speedway, seeing this film on a small screen does take away that wow factor quite a bit, but if you have a 3D projector in your home theater and a large screen, it may be worth taking a look at it, but it's not the Elite or Blu-ray video transfers. I'm a little disappointed that this disc does not have a lossless audio track. Instead, we have a standard Dolby Digital 5.1 track. But the good news is that this is still a very solid track despite its lossy compression. Obviously, you won't expect an undersea documentary like this to push your sound system to the limit, but what you get is a fairly immersive sound mix that does its job right. It makes you feel like you're underwater. You get that nice swoosh of water that subtly fills the rear channels. Danny Elfman's music also sounds pretty well mixed. Of course, since this is an IMAX documentary, all the sound effects are obviously not real sounds but done by Foley work, like the clacking of the shellfish, but the sound design still fit the visuals very well. One thing to note is that this track does sound a little soft on my default volume level on my system, so you may want to crack up the volume a little bit, maybe by 6 decibels if you have a higher end receiver. Once you've done that, it should sound fine. So this sounds like a good disc to buy and watch with your family, right? But before you decide to buy this disc, it's important to know that this 3D Blu-ray has zero special features apart from the main 40-minute film, unlike the 2D Blu-ray which has another full IMAX documentary on the disc. And at least at the time I bought this disc from my local video shop a couple of years ago, this disc was priced at $60. I'm serious. I don't know if it's because of importation fees before it arrived on our local store shelves, but my advice to you is that if you see this disc at anything more than $20, avoid it because it is not worth it for a 40-minute film. or get the 2D Blu-ray if you think you don't need the 3D. I believe it's also cheaper by the way. So 4 stars for this disc, but it comes with an asterisk to warn you that this is only worth getting at a discount.